Welcome to the Volunteer Youth Worker Podcast. Youth ministries rise and fall on the volunteers. So we are here to encourage and equip you. Join the conversation as we tackle the practical questions you are asking so you can help the next generation know Jesus.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Brett Ullman back on the podcast. Brett, you have been a guest and a part of our community broadly for years, I guess, since we've been doing anything here at Youth Worker Community because of our friendship and because you're Canadian too. So we got lots of folks that are listening that are from outside of our country of Canada. The youth ministry community is tight in Canada. So I've seen you speak for decades. And I know every time I have you on the podcast, I probably tell these stories, but I love remembering, like, as a high school student, I remember you speaking at an event on the East Coast. As like a university student, as a young youth pastor, I went to a conference and you spoke. And so it's always a privilege to have you talk about these issues, because this has been something that you've been championing for so long. And today we get a chance to obviously dive in on this idea of mental health and what we as youth workers, primarily volunteers, what we can be doing to actually help our students. And then maybe actually even beyond that, help our churches or our ministries be better at supporting students in the midst of the struggles that they have. So, Brett, first off, before we get into the details, we're recording this in the middle of winter. You're in Ontario. Are you doing anything fun in the winter?
If you're from Ontario, we're recording this right after our, I think we had 55 centimeters of snow.
Yeah.
Of course, my snowblower breaks the day of the big snowfall. It's the only reason you buy a snowblower, for one of these like massive snowfalls.
Yeah. So what'd you do? Did you paid your son, or did you just, it takes hours. You know, people don't know. It literally takes hours and hours, even with a snowblower, but it can take hours and hours and hours to clear snow, even just your driveway. So yeah, what happened?
And we're on, it's called a street and a half. Like, it's more of a main street. So like when the plow comes by, it's 4 feet high. I saw a TikTok video, which was kind of a joke about, like, when it snows, all the dads come outside, and literally like 6 snowblowers were going. Everyone just goes house to house, cleaning off everything. It was good. I like to walk. And so I walk.
Wait, but you didn't, did you have to shovel your driveway, or you got a friend to do it?
Oh no, friends. I had multiple snowblowers that came by.
Amazing. Well, see, that's the kindness of the Canadian spirit. I love that.
And my snowblower just headed off. A guy with a flatbed picked it up just before this, and I watched it head off into the distance to get repaired.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome. Well, we'll pray blessings on the snowblower that it's not bad. But you like to walk. You're a walker. You get out lots of exercise, that kind of stuff, and enjoy the cold weather.
Walking's been one of those things that I've just kind of put as part of my life. I kind of call it mindful walking. Like, so usually for one direction, I have my AirPods in, podcast, music, whatever it might be, but at least half of my walk is nothing. It's just walking. And I live in Ajax, so just east of Toronto, but I live basically on Lake Ontario. And my counselor once said to me, like, just walk. Like, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you taste? What do you smell? Like, and I really just try to do that, just to be kind of fully present in the moment. And there's something really soulful about just being in nature and hearing the waves and just walking. So it's kind of my quiet time, and I enjoy it.
Well, that's amazing. I love that so much. And obviously, because you've been talking about this, and this has been a part of your story and your journey, if folks don't actually know a bit of your history and your journey, we'll link a couple of things in the show notes so they can follow up on Brett. But you've been, talking about mental health for many years, but this has also been a personal struggle that you've gone through in really intense kind of ways that you've been very open about. You've communicated at a number of our events about your own journey, and then how, as you've learned about that, how other people can, process how they do ministry. So we'll try to link a few of those things in the show notes. But one of the reasons why I'm glad that we get a chance to talk today is I'd love for you to share, as you continue to, even in the midst of the pandemic, you've continued to talk on Zoom, you've preached on Sunday mornings at churches, you've spoken at, parents' nights and youth groups. What's new and different in the world of mental health with students? Are we winning the game? Are we helpful? Have we fixed everybody's challenges? Is it all gone away? What's going on when we think about the mental health of teenagers these days?
Oh, that's a big question. It's funny when you, I don't even know where to start with that. I think right now, I think it's important to acknowledge there's a difference between mental health and mental illness. Because it is a very important, and I know during some of the conferences that were done, I think Iona actually did a few comments on this, but we all have mental health, just like we all have physical health. And everyone has lower mental health right now, right? The term that I hear a lot is the word languishing. Depending where you're at, if you're in Ontario right now, restaurants closed, gyms closed. I think out where you're at, you're just having some restrictions. Everywhere's a little different. And especially if you're American, right? We're very different in how things are. But our mental health we're blah. But mental illness is another conversation, right? These are actual conditions diagnosed not by WebMD or you, by your doctor's, psychologist, psychiatrist. And so overall, it's been an interesting season. I find I've been booked most for my talks on mental health and parenting. And I have other talks, sex, dating, pornography, media. And I have a new talk on men called Men Navigating Everything. How can we be better fathers, husbands, and boyfriends? But mental health, it doesn't matter where you live. This is the conversation of the day. And I do... it's funny. It's a podcast, so I'm just going to walk through what I'm experiencing, but I don't really know what to do completely with it yet, because there's been a growing phenomenon of people writing me who say, this is my journey. And they're writing me and saying, this is youth workers, youth pastor, this is youth workers paid and volunteer. This is parents and students who are saying to me, I can't go to my church anymore. And I'm kind of help me understand what you're talking about. And they're talking about how one person wrote, they said, I'm leaving my church to save myself. And they said, and that's a small s, they're not talking savior, Jesus is our savior. They're just saying, I can't be in an environment which is so destructive to my mental health. And it makes me sad to hear that. The one thing we need with the church is the community. Beyond faith, right? It's the community that is why for many years we as Christians have had statistically less mental illness and better mental health in our churches. Because, and I'm not talking schizophrenia, bipolar, I'm just saying with less, we have small groups, we go to church, we're together, we have community. So things like alienation and loneliness and those things that lead, long-term poor mental health leads to mental illness. We've always been doing well. But I don't know if it's that during the pandemic, as we begin to talk about these things, and I know many pastors who've never addressed it have started to address it. But if we had no training and don't maybe understand and have never read a book, and we give an opinion piece conversation on it, or we give a quick, these are big issues people are dealing with. If we don't know how mental illness and poor mental health affects people, how they worship, how they parent, even their ability to come to church or not, sometimes those statements are destructive. There's a quote that I use. There's a great book called Mental Health in the Church. And I'll give you a link for the show notes that has every book that I suggest in every topic. Actually really love it. It's called an Amazon influencer program, and I don't like that term, but I love I can put everything I suggest in one place. But as this is a podcast for volunteers. And so whether you're volunteer paid, I would suggest reading Mental Health in the Church by Stephen Grekvich. It is one of those quintessential, books, not just on mental health, but mental health in the church. And Stephen says, herein lies one of the most pervasive misunderstandings regarding mental illness. So it's a misunderstanding that God spares this kind of pain and suffering from those with deep and abiding faith. Mm. And it's the idea, like, if you're struggling, you therefore must not have deep and abiding faith. Mm. And I use the term whack-a-mole. Remember going to the whack-a-mole game, the mole pops up and you smash it? Like,
I do.
I use that term a lot where
I love that game.
Whack-a-mole should never be the church.
Yeah.
It should never be that I go to a worship service and I hear a pastor preaching and I feel like someone clubs me over the head. Now, we can use that, like, it's okay to have truth and you might feel clubbed. But I'm saying from a mental health standpoint and something that's incorrect, I'm hearing a lot of these conversations where people are saying, maybe you've never addressed mental health. And the first time you do, you just use the verse, don't be anxious about anything. And in your audience, I mean, statistically, some stats say upwards of 50% of your audience might struggle with anxiety. Like, what are you actually saying to them then? Like, they go home anxious and go, well, God, what haven't I done? And it goes back to this works mentality. Like, if I only worshiped God more, if I only prayed more, and I mean, when I first had my breakdown, so we're like 9 years, the people who came across and sat on their couch from me and said, I mean, dozens would say, well, have you tried Jesus? And I would always pause and I'd say, like, what do you mean by that? And they're like, well, Jesus. And I'm like, oh, I know Jesus. But what do you mean by have I tried Jesus? And they would usually, by that little question, go, I don't really know. Isn't that what I'm supposed to say to you? And I'm like, I don't know. And then they would walk away and I would sit kind of, again, whack-a-mole and kind of pray, God, have I not tried you enough? Mm. Kind of like, if I only worked hard enough, I wouldn't struggle with mental illness. Mm. And that idea is just so damaging. It's a ideology that we don't give. Like, we don't say to someone with cancer, to someone, and I have Lyme disease. Like, no one says to me with Lyme disease those sentences, but we say it for mental illness. And so I always just say we need like this beginning playing field where in all of our unwellnesses, let's use it. I don't even know if that's a word, but like, it doesn't matter what you're struggling with, you can begin to look forward in your journey and not just be told you didn't do something right. And if you only change something, you'll be better. It's the idea of we're over spiritualizing something that, I mean, it's unbelievably uncommon that the answer to mental illness is and I say unbelievably uncommon, like it's not ever a common thing. But most of the answers I hear for mental health are always in the spiritual realm.
So when you are hearing from folks that are leaving the church around this conversation, is it because the only way that they've heard mental health talked about inside of the ministries that they're a part of is as like a works-based response? Like, you've sinned and that's why. It's kind of like Job's friends, like, surely you've done something wrong to experience this kind of thing. Is that the feedback you're getting?
It's a mix of all of those. Well, what have you done? Have you stopped reading your Bible? I still get that. 9 years into my journey, at least twice a month, someone writes me and says, have you stopped reading your Bible? And, like, part of me laughs because it's like, walk that through. What you're saying is, if I stop reading my Bible, God looks down and punishes me for it by giving me mental illness. Have you ever heard the term hurtful hermeneutic? Like, it is just an incorrect, and it's such a hurtful way to view those kinds of things. But I mean, those are, have you sinned? People, like, often I still get a couple times a month, well, is there sin in your life? And my answer is always like, yeah, tons. And then they don't know what to say because, but here's where I try to give people grace, which is this. Part of me gets angry at people who say these things. Then I realize they don't know. And I try to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're actually in front of you talking to you, which is more than, if you struggle with mental health, you know that many people just aren't around anymore. You're kind of on your own. And so these are people who are actually talking to you, which I think is a great thing. They're actually there. But most of us have never had any training, any conversation on this. I mean, the number of times in the past few years, I've done denominational pastors' conferences, like whatever denomination has me in, just to talk about this. And people, like, I'm 50 and they'd like, I've never ever been trained in how to do this. And this is where it's interesting, the term, to go back to what you're saying, when people are writing me these things, the language I hear is, it's just not a safe space. Now, when you say safe space and triggering, like that's usually used, like we talk about universities and language and other things, but it actually is a reality. Like, how do we make our churches a safe place for these people?
And I want to tee you up for some of those things, because I know you put some specific thought even into that one question, and I think that would be great to leave our youth workers with today. I want to just ask this, and I could be way off on this, so you'll correct me if I'm wrong. I wonder if part of the mental health and the willingness to talk about mental health is sometimes experienced as a generational divide. That there's a generation, there's kind of an age break somewhere where if you're older than this, maybe this hasn't been an open conversation for you. Whereas if you're younger than this age, you've heard about it a lot. And why I say that is that I think I know a number of youth workers that are in their 20s, let's say, who this has been like they grew up on Bell Let's Talk, let's destigmatize it. And so in some ways, I don't know if this is the case, but in some ways, some people might over-identify with their mental health. Like all of a sudden, whatever the struggle is that they've had or whatever challenges they have with their mental health, this is the thing that almost defines them solely. I don't know. Is that something that you've seen or experienced or heard, or am I off base on that?
I mean, you're right. We live, our kids are growing up today with Bell Let's Talks, with mental health classes in school and things. And my concern with that is where a kid goes online and he sees a TikTok video that talks about bipolar, self-diagnoses themselves as bipolar, creates an identity around being bipolar, and they're actually not. Like, we don't self-identify ourselves with these conversations. Like, I hope no one has any struggles with these things. But you're right, with an older generation, sometimes never address these things. It's funny though, often, so I do mental health talks on Sunday mornings, and it's a little unorthodox. Like, we're not doing an expository walking through something, but like if it affects one of us, it affects all of us. And so often pastors will say, like, I'm a little worried about our older audience. I am so impressed when I speak in churches at seniors. And they walk up, like the number of people who walk up. I've had people in their 90s walk up with tears streaming down their eyes and say, you got a few minutes? And they talk about what it was like when they grew up with their anxiety and their depression. People said, I've never told anyone about this. And so I think sometimes, like, yes, as we get older, and even myself, like, we get more set in what we believe and rigidity on these things. But I'm often really impressed by people who are just, because people have been struggling with these things for many years. Now, there is an increase. I mean, we're seeing, especially with young teenage girls, a massive increase in anxiety. And there's so many conversations with that, which is social media, its effects, over parenting. Like, there's a whole bunch of other things that go along with that. But yeah, I was just saying, I'm impressed with seniors sometimes.
Yeah. The seniors are nice. And they are understanding, because I'm 100% with you. I know some of those stories too. Okay. So we've got youth workers listening, and like you said, this is a massive conversation. You speak on this, like you are willing to come into ministries virtually, in person. So we'll link your website in the show notes. So if people are like, oh, that'd be interesting to have like an expert come in and talk about this. But even just to kind of get the conversation rolling, if we're thinking about our own youth ministries, are there a few things that you might suggest just to make sure that we're, even this week, trying to help make our space a safe place for people to be themselves, or to come as they are? What would you recommend?
So I have a video, and you can tag it later on, like 10 things you can look at, to make your church a safe space. I think one of the biggest is just actually talk about it. Like, when you sit and plan out your year, you should have at least one evening that you're like, you know what, I'm going to actually address mental health today. And for some of you, you're like, I got this. For some of you, you're listening to this and you're like, yep. I struggle. My wife struggles. My husband struggles, like my family, like whoever. And for some of you, you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And that's where, these kind of podcasts are great. And there's people like myself and others who are willing to come and be a catalyst for this conversation. But number one is talk about it and don't brush over it. Don't give cliches, quick, easy answers, because it's messy. Like youth ministry is messy. Mental health is messy, right? Everyone's different. Everyone's unique in this conversation, but address it.
It's interesting. Even as you said this, I've been rethinking, even as we approach this as a topic, sometimes as youth workers, we think we have to talk about mental health in the sense of like, we're going to teach and train how to get better or have better mental health or find success in your whatever you're dealing. But I've heard you in like the issue that I think we're experiencing a lot of times is the theological implications of dealing with this reality. And so maybe as our role as youth workers, sometimes instead of trying to help students actually figure out what to do next in their depression or their anxiety, is to have at least a deep theological understanding of how we can live with suffering in our midst, how we can still follow Christ even though we're experiencing this type of suffering. And as youth workers, I think we know that in some of the other arenas of life, perhaps, why do bad things happen to good people? Why does God allow suffering to happen? But to allow it to apply into this kind of setting is something that even just for us to acknowledge, thoughtfully here before we end up in the conversations with our students could maybe be valuable. I don't know. That was coming out as I was thinking about what you're saying before to applying it to here now.
I agree. I always use the analogy body, mind, and soul. Your issue might be physical, so we go see a doctor, right? Naturopath, like we go see people, and at the same time we eat healthy, we sleep as best as we can, exercise. So the physical realm, and then it could be in the emotional, psychological realm. So we go see a registered, psychologist, psychotherapist, or these things. We learn strategies how to cope. Now, this is where language really matters, because people wait for me to say it might be spiritual, but I don't say that. And I said this earlier, like it's very uncommon, the answers here, but this is the big sentence. Your faith is the foundation of who you are. Our faith in Jesus is it's that foundation which we journey everything in life. So it might not be the answer to your mental health, but it is the bedrock which you journey through it. And that nuance is a really important thing for us, because then we're not saying to people, well, you just need to do this more, but we're saying the reasons we build and grow and do our spiritual disciplines and those things is because we know God's with us. And this is where sermon analogies come in, like knowing that God's with us, whether you feel it or not, right? It's just that you're not alone. You might feel alone in your journeys, which we all do, but you're not. So you're letting people know that God's with them, but you're also addressing it so that you in the flesh are sitting there in front of them saying that you're addressing this. You're creating an environment where they know that they can actually come and share things. And even if you don't know an answer, it's okay to say, like, thank you so much for sharing. I need to get back to you on that. Right? And that's where you might be listening to a podcast like this, or you're spending some time on YouTube or getting a book or something else. But and that kind of leads me into the second one, which is get some education. Volunteer, paid staff, whoever. I think we need to understand this topic. And so Living Works, I think they're based out of BC. So they have a new Living Works Faith, which is just, I forget how many videos. I did it in like a day and a half. Like, it's just looking at mental health from a faith standpoint. Mental health first aid, which I think every youth worker should go through. It's a Saturday, or like usually it's one Saturday for like 7 hours. I did mine in Toronto at Tyndale. They do it every year or two. But just get some education. I mean, you can take a mental health coaching. I mean, I'm actually in school to be a registered psychotherapist, but you could actually go and take a mental health coaching course, like any way that you can learn about this and come alongside. And again, podcasts like this and some of the books, which we'll suggest and stuff, are other great places to kind of begin as well.
That's great. Do you want to drop a couple other thoughts for our youth workers thinking about making their ministry a safe place? Okay.
This one is a church walkthrough. a friend of mine, her name's Andrea Foster. So she speaks on families with special, I'm going to use the wrong term. I see disabilities. And that term changes sometimes. So give me some grace if I'm saying it incorrectly. But the reality, so she talks about doing a walkthrough. So if you have, whether it's someone in a wheelchair or a kid with autism who cries out in a service, like how can you make our church, is there a place for people struggling with those things? Think of it the exact same way. How can we walk through so for our example today, our youth ministry, how do we walk through what we're going to do and make sure there's no, let's use the term whack-a-moles throughout the day. Mm-hmm. I know what's hard for me is when it's like I'm not having a good day. I didn't sleep. I'm anxious. And I finally get to church. And, one of the first things that happens is musical worship begins. And the first thing the person says is everyone stand. Now, for most people, it's irrelevant. But for someone like me, I can't stand. And so my anxiety manifests as dizziness. And when my church is a stadium seating church, and any church I go to, it actually doesn't matter. If I have to stand, I actually get dizzy. And the moment I'm dizzy, I'm white-knuckled holding onto the pew in front of me. Well, I'm not involved in worship anymore. I'm now involved in trying to just stand, which is not the idea of worship. And so the same in youth ministry. This is what I always say. And I've begun doing something. When I speak on Sunday mornings, I always have a quick conversation with the musical worship leader just to say, I just want, because I don't want them to go online and see what I've said and then feel bad that they didn't say it. But I'm just so a friend of mine's a PA announcer for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And Mike, you'll always hear him say, rise if you can for the anthem. Mm-hmm. That little line of permission is really good. Now, forget about just people with mental health struggles. What about a mom who's been up breastfeeding all night? Or a father who's been up bottle feeding all night? Or someone who's just had hip surgery and they didn't sleep well? So, someone who just got to church and they have nothing left. And so I love the line, rise if you can, or just, we're glad you're here. Whether you stand or sit or kneel or whatever you want, worship God. And so it's just giving people permission. You're not whack-a-mole. People often just say, well, why does it matter? It's because I've had people look over at me kind of as I'm sitting. And so I'm sitting, but I'm not sitting because I'm showing disrespect to anything. I'm sitting because I can now take part in what's going on. Mm. And other practical things, ropes are an interesting one. And with COVID, I know we have pews that we rope off, every second pew and stuff, but I'm talking more when we, everyone down to the front. So picture you're at a youth night and, whether you have 20 kids or 200 kids, sometimes we want everyone at the front. But someone like me, I don't sit at the front. And if my anxiety's high and I'm ushered in and suddenly put in the front few rows, I'm done. I actually might get up and leave. And so I was at a church once and we were setting up probably about an hour before. And the pastor said to me, I think, I forget how he worded it, but I think he said, do you like ropes or not? Is it okay? And I just said, if it's okay, could we just get rid of them? And as I said that, a woman's walking by, putting her coat on, not off, on. And as she hears me say the ropes are going, she turns to the pastor and me and she says, are you guys removing the ropes? And I said, yes. And she then started taking her coat off. And the pastor said, really humbly, just said, I don't know your name, blah, blah, blah. Help me explain this interaction. Why were you leaving? And she said, ropes. And she just said, I really struggle with social anxiety. When I'm here, that's where I feel comfortable in that corner. And because I had to come to the front, I don't think I could handle it. So I was going to go home. And the pastor looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, I don't care about ropes, but I almost sent someone home tonight because of something that's so irrelevant. Mm-hmm. And so often I say to people for youth night, I don't care where they sit. Some kid sits in the back corner. I'm glad you're here. Mm-hmm. And if that's where you need to sit, that's okay. And the other one, sorry, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just gonna like that. So the walkthrough. So these are like hyper practical, which is so good. And to think about that walkthrough, and even to invite other people to speak into that, like, hey, because this isn't like a static thing. Like, oh, as soon as you stop roping off chairs, like all of a sudden, everybody feels welcome in your space. Like that could change next week or next year or whatever it might be. And, obviously lots of us, the experience we offer, it might have some pretty significant barriers that we can't just immediately adjust. And yet to be able to do that walkthrough and kind of even know what the barriers might be. I just think even as like, as somebody that's, grew up and kind of didn't know where to fit in or who to talk to, like recognizing and knowing that first encounter and being able to connect with students and make sure that they know what comes next is so valuable off the front end. And so as youth workers, oftentimes that start, we're used to connecting with our other youth worker friends, or, we just came out of a meeting or a huddle, whatever it might be. And so we're chatting amongst ourselves, but to try to, instead of that, take the time to actually watch students as they're coming in and get them, grab them, give them, not grab them physically, but grab them with attention to be able to make sure that they feel safe as soon as they arrive. All that stuff is so valuable. What were you going to continue on with though? I don't want to lose that.
I'm going to go back to that in a second. I was with a youth pastor once and we did a walkthrough, and what they do to begin is they have an hour of kind of like hangout time, foosball tables, pool tables and all that stuff. And I said, where do the kids with social anxiety hang out in this moment? And there's this pause, and he said, what do you mean? I'm like, well, like some of our kids come, there's tons of friends that, they don't care where, like they're happy. This is their world, right? They come and they're with everything. But what about those kids who come and either they don't have anyone or they have a bit of social anxiety? And so what we kind of chatted about was he created a little, just off to the side, like 5 couches, and I forget what it was. He put some puzzles and but it was just he created an environment for anyone who didn't have a place to go. Yeah. This is your place to go. But it's not like, anyone who doesn't have a place to go over here. Like that's kind of another whack-a-mole in a different way.
No, but my classic that I've tried to use in ministries we work with is just coloring pages. Because it's sometimes hard to find, like, how do you create a different separate space? But even just to have on a table in your space, a couple of coloring pages, mazes or connected dots, whatever it is, easy to print off. And even if it's just pencils, like it's, get pencil crayons, something. If you got a couple extra dollars, getting those types of mazes that are like 3D, with a ball in them or something along those lines. And I've seen that be a magnet for students that are, that might struggle with some of these things. And the interesting thing, Brett, is obviously I don't think, I got to be careful here, but I don't know if our ministries will always be welcoming or helpful for everybody. And so I think as youth workers, sometimes we might have to be okay with that. But the best thing in that regard is then to know if we can connect with somebody and we recognize, this space isn't going to be the best for this person. Do I know a spot that might be? And we were on the road to connecting with youth workers across our country, and there's a youth worker in Victoria, and we're talking about dreams for your ministry. Like, hey, if everything's went well, like what would your ministry look like? And so a lot of people are talking about like attendance growth, like more students at our ministry, we're connecting with more in our community. And there's this wrestle in this one youth worker, because she's like, to be honest, our group is small, but it's filled with kids that have social anxiety. And if our group grew anymore, it wouldn't be safe for these particular kids. And so it was encouraging to notice that she had this really thoughtful, clear strategy, like this is the group of kids that we are here for and that we are able to be a gospel community for. But then also, because this is my tribe, so I'm like, how good would it be to have like 3 or 4 of those kinds of spaces that, are only the 5 kids, but that anybody with social anxiety knew that there'd be a gospel community nearby them. And so, yeah, they wouldn't be larger gatherings, but what if we had more of them? And so I don't know if that was exciting or not, but the bottom line being, to recognize and know, like, I've sent people to other churches because I knew as I was talking with them, like, oh, this community is actually not going to be the best for you. But that's okay because I know my friends across the road at such and such ministry, and that's the best spot. You got to check it out. And if that doesn't work, you got to let me know and I can find another place. And if we might be actually okay with that as the Big C church, to be able to look out for each other in that regard.
Oh, I like that.
I could be crazy though. Okay, sorry. You give me your the one I interrupted you 3 times ago.
Yeah,
and then we should draw this to a close for folks, and send them to your website.
Well, the other one was just, and this is a hard one. It's just when we do musical worship, the music that's loud sets off some people. Like for me, loud music makes me anxious. And so this is a tough one. And I know in big church, there's a number of churches. I was at a church, Alberta, BC. I think it was in BC. Oh, it all blends together. I was going to think of the hotel I was at. It's a Hampton Inn, which is everywhere. Anyways, I'm in this church in the morning, and the pastor said, okay, so like he brought me in to speak on mental health, and I'm sitting there, and he said I was just attending. He said before the sermon, so the music's going to come up, they're going to do a few songs, and he's going to preach. And he said, if anyone the loud music affects them, go outside. He says, outside there's a bunch of couches, there's plasma TVs, music's a bit quieter. And I kind of like that. Like it's permission, but here's what brought tears to my eyes. He said, and when you're done, once music stops, I start preaching. He said, you are not interrupting me. Just come back in. I don't care. And I'm just like, the permission of you can go and just come in when you're ready. See, these, we were using the term barriers. I think these are just unnecessary barriers. Mm-hmm. There's like, that one's a little more tricky trying to figure out, especially from a youth, because you can't just have people in another room or something. Mm-hmm. But a lot of these are just really simple things, like changing language, like rise if you can. These are really simple things to try to include everyone who's there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, when you think about your youth group, you've got a small group of students, and there are obviously probably in that group, students with a varying degree of needs or challenges or issues with kind of gathering this type of way. And so even to have it as an open conversation, I've sometimes used it in groups where it's like, man, I've got the middle school boys and they're bonkers. And so in some ways you assume like, all of their craziness is because of malice. Like they're doing this because they don't want to listen or, they're disrespectful, whatever it is. It's like, it might be more complicated than that. And so even just to be able to give that permission of like, listen, if this is too much for you, or if this type of conversation that we're leading is not connecting with you, or if you find it hard to pay attention, like, you can let me know. It's not going to hurt my feelings, or we can come up with a different solution, or what, just to start in that kind of vein and to recognize the format that you've been given as a youth worker doesn't have to be the format that you use to do this ministry of drawing kids closer to Jesus. And so as a volunteer, what kinds of questions might you be able to ask of students to kind of understand and know your group, what their challenges are, and then find ways. The goal here isn't to sit in a circle and to have people pass the conch and answer the questions from the page. Mm-hmm. The goal here is transformation, that Jesus would transform our lives. And so if we can discover a unique or different way to do that for a group, wouldn't it be great to be able to go that route? So Brett, this is so helpful. We've got to connect people directly to you. So if they want to have a further conversation, or if they think even to connect you into their ministry would be beneficial, where can people find you?
Let me give you, we talked about 5. I'm going to give you the last 2 really, really.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Sorry. We're on a list.
Resource your congregation is what I say to churches, but resource your youth group, just meaning if they want to see counselor. So you're in Moncton, you're in Fredericton, you're in Lloydminster, you're wherever. Here are the counselors. Here are a bunch of them. Here's their email address, websites. Here is, and this is as kids get older, like here's freedom sessions, celebrate recovery, like the things that our churches, like I know a church that runs Alcoholics Anonymous, and I know younger people who end up going because they're struggling with different things. So it's just kind of resourcing. Here's the book of the month on mental health or other things. Mm-hmm. And I put all that together in number 5, which is a book table. I was in a church in Alberta, and as I came, so I was speaking, and I went in one door, and I finished, we came out the other door, and there was this huge, and it wasn't a booth, because it actually had wood, like a peak, they built it up, and it said something like "We Care" on the front. And when I looked down, it was a pin map of their city, all the different environments with the legend, like counseling, this church is doing grief care, cancer care, and then there was a book of the month, and you could actually buy it. They bought a case, and if you wanted it, you could take it, and there was some in the library. But I remember just feeling, I felt really emotional. I'm like, if I lived here, I would go here. Mm-hmm. It's just a declaration of for those of you who journey with this, we're here. We might not know all the answers, but we're here. And we support you, and we love you, and we just want to get better. It's kind of putting your hands out and just saying, how do we get better in this conversation, which is kind of a great way to end off, right? How do we, in our local youth ministry, look at including people better, discussing this conversation better, and just kind of walk a little bit forward in this journey?
Yeah, that's so helpful, Brett. And if folks want to get in touch, I dropped my email in the show notes. We tried to compile this last summer some of the resources specifically for teenagers across our country of Canada. So feel free to reach out, and it's just a working document. It's not the be all end all. But anytime. I mean, I worked at a church in Barrie and Aurelia, Ontario, and Aurelia, we had that like cheat sheet. Here's all the different things. Here's the shelter. Here's the food banks. And to know that resource is available. So if you're a youth worker, even to ask your leadership, like, hey, do we have something like that available? Just to know so that you could reference it in the moment. It's so valuable. So I love it so much. Okay, so Brett, we're going to connect lots of folks to you through those show notes. So feel free to reach out. Turns out you are wonderful to chat with, and you do like to respond to people. So they can get in touch with you through your website. I think you're on Facebook as well. Are you on all the social medias? Which ones do you like to use?
All the normals,
I
LinkedIn.
don't know. Are you on TikTok? That's the most popular one.
So I now have an account, and I'm just about to start doing parenting minutes on TikTok. Yeah.
Well, there you go. So that's very impressive. I thought I was going to catch you on that one. So we will link all of those things in the show notes, and certainly would love for people to get in touch with you. Brett, thank you so much for your time today and helping us out as youth workers as we connect with the students in our care.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.